much. Is this on? Is it good? Okay. There's 3 handouts before I get started. One of them is for a drawing for a free coaching session. So if you could fill that out and then pass it, just, collect those, that would be a lot of fun. Then you have one on your workplace and how generationally savvy it is. And then another one, which will be even more fun, on how to use the generations on a team based on their strengths. So that'll be a lot of fun for us to go over afterwards. What is this thing called the generations? It seems that it hasn't gone away. It seems that there's lots of clashes. I used to do this speech, and I did it in a really linear way. I started off with the traditionalists, then moved to the boomers, and even split the boomers up into 2 cohorts, the older boomers and the younger boomers. And then I did Gen X and then the millennials. Well, it got very dynamic. I think the recession kind of just pushed this generational clash over the edge. So I decided, okay, let's do it more on the topic, and let's mimic the dynamics that happens in the workplace. So that's the presentation. And Michelle and the Dallas Economist Club, which are really serious people, even they thought it was good. So you're going to get the benefit of that. So even before I start on some scenarios and talking about the generations, do we have any traditionalists in the group? Okay, great. Okay. Boomers?
Does everyone know the definition?
Well, we'll get there. Okay. How about Gen X? Okay. And millennials. I see 3. Okay, so let's get started. So this is a typical generational clash on dressing and behaving. And a lot of this confusion based on a generation's values creates a workplace that's not a lot of fun. Confusion on communication skills. So why do I say on values for a generation? Because the way I look at the generations is the shared events. For instance, if you were 5 years old or younger, well, 4.5, do you remember 9/11? It's when you reach 5 that you start to remember historical events. So the way I look at the generations is the power and influence of these shared events. And in 2001, besides 9/11, Enron happened. And that had a big impact on the millennials, besides the Great Recession. So let's look at that and how that impact of some shared events. For instance, with the older boomers, it might be Vietnam or Woodstock. Even if you weren't there, you might have talked about it in school. And then younger boomers had other things. And remember Clinton, that was a big discussion, even though we were very prosperous. So what happened in these events? So here's the way I look at some of these generations. And you notice the boomers start 1943, not the way the Census Bureau might do them 1946. Because who were you in school with, and what happened, and what do you remember? And the woman who's who's in the news now with Lean In, she is a Generation X. She's 43, Sheryl Sandberg. Right in the middle, born 1969. So right in the middle of that generation. And you notice Generation Z, I start them at 1996. Other authorities start them at 2001. And the reason I start them at 1996 is you had to be 5 years old or older to remember 9/11 and Enron. So that's why I say millennials stopped in 1996. And I think they'll break the millennials up into 2 cohorts. the pre-recession one, Great Recession, if you had a job, you have a different impression versus the ones that were graduating at that time and couldn't get a job. So I think that's what will happen. So how does the workplace shape up now? These are the percentages of the generations. And notice the size of the generation. The millennials are very big, almost as big as the boomers. And not too many people are retiring if they don't have to because of the situation, of the recession, and not having those retirement dollars the way they thought they would. Here's the information on Generation Z. They'll be a little bit like the millennials, but millennials tell me that Generation Z is different than they are. Any questions so far? Okay. So let's look at people in the news to give this generational perspective. So you see the difference in their reaction. Okay, now let's look at the generational pain point. So what's a pain point? Someone tell me what a pain point is.
Not having enough money to retire.
That's what keeps you up at night.
Not having enough money to pay your bills.
Okay, so when the traditionalists look at the workplace, they say, diversity, what's diversity? And they go, I'm healthy, I'm not ready to retire. But I'm a little bit different than the other generations. I just stayed at one company and kept working.
Also, one other thing.
Yes.
I think that makes us different. Those of us who are traditionalists, I'm not in that, but with experience, that group has experienced more in combination than any other group.
What do you mean by that?
I'm talking about all the things that they have lived through. World War II, being born during World War II, and then the Korean War, and the boom and bust, the Clintons, the Obamas, all of that.
So
They have all of that.
They have they have a perspective and that's what I'll go into. Some of the wealth that they bring to the workplace is their institutional knowledge. And they also started working when American industry started to thrive. The automobile industry, the aluminum industry, the metal industry, the coal industry, they were there forging that. They were there with the suburban, let's move to suburbia. So that was the generation that laid the foundation for American business and the strength that we have. So can you imagine what they've seen in the evolution? Take the automobile industry and how that's changed. It's finally coming back, and it came back. But they were there, the solid, working, corporate. And the one thing they did was separate business from family. When you went to work, you went to work. So they're very loyal. And for them, staying at one company was really important.
Another thing about them is that sometimes they resent the younger people because younger people want to come in at higher levels, and they feel like they started at the bottom and worked their way up. They worked at one company. They started at the one company and worked their way up the ladder. And sometimes there's resentment in the office place when the youngster comes in and serves them.
Right. They share that with the boomers.
Yeah.
So generations that are adjacent to each other may share some values, although there may be some differences. So yes, the boomers and the traditionalists, in-person meetings. What's this virtual business? Not comfortable unless they see you. And the boomers are feeling the disrespect from the millennials more because they were in leadership positions. And they have the looming retirement. For some reason, the traditionalists are not as antagonistic about that because they feel they're so happy to keep on working. But the boomers are feeling a lot of that tension. So what tension and pain points do the Generation X feel? Now remember, they were the latchkey kids who said, oh, we don't need leadership. Oh, career is not, it has to be work-life balance. Well, now they're in leadership positions, and they go, leadership? Me? What am I going to do? So that's one of their pain points. And they find themselves handling the conflict management between the boomers and the millennials. So that's where they find themselves. And the millennials, believe it or not, the in-person meetings are a point of stress for them because everything's been virtual. And where is that? So let's look at some scenarios that might take place in the hallway of a company, our imaginary company. So two boomers are talking and they're saying, well, I told the millennial to take notes. So the other boomer says, oh, I'm sure she brought in a pencil and a paper, and they're chuckling away. And he said, I was so annoyed during the meeting because all she kept doing was texting. He said, but guess what? By the time I got back to my office, there was the meeting notes in email. Well, did I feel silly that I sat there and worried that she wasn't taking notes? And the other boomer said, how'd she do that? No pencil and paper. So that's some of the tension. And yet the boomer, when he realized that here was a skill that maybe he wasn't utilizing, and maybe that's something to think about. So that's two boomers talking about the millennial, and sure enough, did the work. Everything worked out. Two millennials are talking. And they've texted each other, and they meet in a place, right? And what do you think they're saying? Oh, I have 3 meetings today in person. I have to be here. I can't wait till tomorrow. You're laughing because I can work at home again. It'll be virtual. I have all this interaction. I can't wait to get home. And the other one says, yes, I know what you mean. So those in-person meetings become a source of it's pain point because they like the virtual. And sure enough, down the hall, we have the 2 Gen X's, and they're saying, oh my goodness, I'm now the leader of this multi-generational group. Guess what I did? I signed up for leadership training, leadership skills, and I got a coach. I don't know what to do. And the conflict, oh my goodness. So here's the workplace is very dynamic. So it may look like that more than a unified team. Here are the 9 things we're going to look at and the differences that each generation has. So you have a worksheet there that has how would I use set up a team with the skills of the generation. There you go. So if you were leading a team and had to pick a generation to do some of these things on your team to make it successful, what generation would you choose? So you can take a guess as we go through it. What generation? Oh, yes.
At my office, we talk about Gen Y some. Is that a subset of
No, that's part of millennial. That's another name for millennials.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
I was looking for the Y.
That's the same as a millennial, yeah. You know, every time I'd say Gen X and Gen Y, people would so I use the word millennial, just to make it clearer. That's because some people get confused.
Can I follow up with one more question?
Yes, go ahead.
So I was kind of shocked, and I'll admit that I know a lot more about traits than I do years, but I was shocked to see that I kind of fall in the first couple of years of millennials.
Right.
Because I would much more identify myself with a Gen X.
Right.
So when you get to the cusp of those, do you see that a lot? That
Yes.
people go one way or the other?
Yes. And depends who was around you and what was your bigger influence. But if you're smack in the middle of the years, you tend to have those generational traits.
Okay.
And what happened, if I can go back to that slide, what happened with, if you look at the years,
So I was born in 1979, for example.
okay, so you're just in the beginning
I didn't mean it like that.
of the millennials, right?
Right.
So you might have some Gen X characteristics.
From a work aspect.
Right, exactly.
But you know, I'm finding that in my specific career path, I'm being forced to act more like a Gen Y millennium because of all the high-tech stuff I have to input, and virtual meetings and all that, so I'm kind of confused.
No, it's every time something happens with my computer, I turn to my son, I go, can you fix this? What happened? So it's good to use people for their strengths. It is more efficient, though. You notice it's much more efficient. And though people miss walking down the hallway and having discussions, and I'm going to get to that. What was passed was a lot of information. Let's start off with loyalty and keep the questions coming. So the traditionalists expected to stay in one company and just continue to work there, right? You retired, you got a gift at the end of that. Very steady, very good for templates and forms and processes, moving it along and very much into the company. What will happen if we do this? What will happen if we do that? How can we concede to move it along? The boomers were workaholics. They like loyalty to the team. So traditionalists, loyalty to the company. The boomers were loyal to their team. You'd have team awards and trophies. You'd have all sorts of things with the team. That's when matrix management started. We'd have teams. Gen X was loyal to their career and maybe their manager if they liked their manager. Why are you laughing?
Because it's true.
Right. Right. And the millennials are loyal to their friends, to their generation, to their tribe.
What we also saw is that, we were talking about it here, is that the boomers, the traditionalists, because they were workaholics, they worked until the project was over, and they'd be there in the office until 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock at night, asking for the lights to be turned on and on. And the Gen Xers and the millennials, 5 o'clock comes, they are like out the door. If you're lucky, right? They are out the door. They and when they come in to get a job, title is more important than money, and vacation time is equal to the title. They want, Gen Xers and millennials want their time off.
Right. I can overhear a conversation, two millennials in the gym, and one is saying, I'm leaving this job, and the job I'm going to is $10,000 less, but I like the title. That's exactly what she said.
I like the title.
I like the title.
And this way I'll get 4 weeks off to go skiing or whatever.
Right.
It's their lifestyle.
I have always worked for European companies, except now I'm working for an American company. European companies act like minimals. They are 4 o'clock, they're out the door.
Yep.
I mean, they don't even work a 40-hour week.
Right.
If it doesn't happen, it doesn't get done. Interesting.
And they have guaranteed vacations. When I worked for EDS, you couldn't lay off the London or the France office. You had to do certain things that were in the government regulations, and depending on your level of education, it was
And Canadian.
yeah. So, lots of regulations about that. Yeah, that's maybe some of the things that got them into their economic. Yeah. So, but that's true. It's very true. Organization. They look at the organization, the traditionalists, as it's going to continue. So how can I make the organization successful? Hard work. When I come to work, I'm working. The boomers are now saying, well, I don't want to retire. I want to still work. I want to be active part of the workforce. And the Gen X are finding themselves in leadership or being forced into it as the companies force out the boomers and the traditionalists. And the millennials are going, what career? They promised me a career. And you know what's happening to the millennials is that with the additional health care requirements and the increase in taxes, they're being hired as 1099s, tried out to see if they'll succeed, and because they're part-time or have a limit on their hours, they don't get benefits. So they're getting really squunched in this whole situation. And so if you were an older millennial, you almost made out better because maybe you had experience, you were in a company and had some longevity. But the younger ones are really feeling the pinch now, and it's really difficult. So their promise of a career when they were growing up in the 90s and things were just flourishing, it's a culture shock right now for a lot of them. So that's what's happening. And starting with the millennials, they were waiting for that challenging job. So you're right, they'll change for the title, and they want to add value, and they're finding it difficult. And when you feel you're not hired on as an employee, but you're still 1099, you know, that's a demotivator right there. Well, they don't think enough of me to hire me. And Gen X, they were always resourceful in the sense that they didn't like their job, they went to another one, but they owned their career. The boomers and the traditionalists were company loyal, except the boomers got stuck in all that downsizing and right-sizing, and they kind of got squeezed out. The traditionalists, they wound up staying at the same company. So as a generation with security, the traditionalists had it much easier. It wasn't until the boomers got into the downsizing and the right-sizing that things got more difficult. And Gen X just expected it because they took charge of their career. So if you were the boomers, depending if you were young or an older boomer, then you got kind of caught in all that and kind of caught surprised by it. So that was the career situation. Now, diversity. Now, you know that with the traditionalists, if any of you watch Mad Men, that is introducing a little bit of diversity. So it really wasn't a big deal. And then the boomers started, but it was men and women or black and white. It was, you know, there were two categories of diversity. Then we get to Gen X, and we start expanding the definition, and they want on-premise childcare, and they want daddy leave, and mommy leave, and I'm going to a soccer game. So things started to change. And I think, didn't JCPenney have on-site childcare? Yeah.
Childcare, fitness, and medical center.
Yeah, so they had all that, yeah. Very different than probably what they have now. And EDS had that too. And the millennials, as long as I like you, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. And it's who you are. If that's who you are and we like you, you're part of the tribe. So they don't see gender. They don't see multiracial. They don't see ethnic. They don't see man, women, black or white. If I like you, it's okay. It's very different approach.
Well, part of that, don't you think, is because the millennials, as children of the boomers, they grew up in some daycares. And they were with a lot of other children of all different races and all different colors. Other than, like, boomers grew up in homes, mostly mom stayed at home. So I think the millennials just grew up thinking that the world was colorful.
Right, and when you have mom at home, you don't have, there's a lot of communication that you don't have to do. If you're in childcare, well, and there's 5 cookies left and, you know, there's 6 of you, you've got to speak up really, I want that cookie. I mean, it creates a different type of communication or social interaction.
And I think it created different kinds of people.
Right, and so, and if you're in childcare with, let's say you're at JCPenney's, all different kind of workers that went to the childcare, gives you a whole different perspective. But they also had structured play dates, so that's another. So yes, it's a mixture of all those influences. All right, now the leadership style. So if you were a leader in the traditionalists, it was very, very hierarchical. I remember I went to EDS And it was, he was on top, and these people, 4 people, and then you got a little bigger as you went down. It's a real pyramid, right? And clearly the person was on top. And as you made it up, you had to, was a rite of passage, and you had to be recommended and gone through committee review and all sorts of things. It was just really hierarchical. And it was who you knew, and did you have mentors and sponsors. It's just a hierarchical process. So then the boomers come in and they go, well, let's look at this hierarchical leadership. And let's see, we could do matrix, and we could flatten it out a little bit. And that's when all the leadership models started. So I don't know if any of you remember, we had leadership skills. Then we had the traits of a leader. Then we had this kind of leader. Then we had emotional intelligent leader. Every kind of leadership book.
What do you mean by matrix?
Matrix. Okay. Who can explain what matrix management is?
You report to everybody. Very entertaining. Don't ever make anybody mad.
The person who might administer your salary or whose group you were in on paper wasn't the person who really you interacted with in terms of your projects or your work. And you might interact with 3 people. And then they give feedback to the person who was doing your salary, let's say, and they give that input into your rating or ranking.
Do you know much about Lockheed Martin? That sounds kind of like what the defense industry does. I've never heard of it.
All the industries were like that.
Example is you have 7 or 8 divisions, and the financial people report to the general manager or president of each division, but they also report to the corporate financial person.
Yeah.
So everybody has 2 or 3 different bosses,
Okay.
and they literally will draw it out so that it's
Very
matrix. And you report to everybody. And make everybody make everybody happy in your time.
Right, you could report into headquarters, but you might be in a location not in headquarters where that's who you work with, and that's whose projects you're on. But the person in headquarters could be deciding what your rating is and ranking. So that's what the matrix, they flattened out the hierarchy, and everybody had input, right? It's like and so it became like a lot of teams. You were on teams. And then all sorts of people had input into how you were rated. So that's what happened. And there were all sorts of leadership models. And this leadership model was the emotionally intelligent leader, and then all different models. What fit into a company culture? What was consistent with the company culture or the team culture? And it would change. And it would change with the person. Wouldn't you say it changed? It was sort of a moving target. So you never quite knew.
As long as you made everybody happy.
Right. Right. So what that meant is you had to run around and make sure do you like this? Is this okay? And you had to do a lot of teamwork in getting approval, but you never quite got approval. And so...
Well, nobody wanted to actually take responsibility for everything, so you walk into a meeting, and if you didn't get a negative review, you knew that you were supposed to continue the project.
Right. It was really difficult.
Virtually nobody was had a final say.
What did you say?
Nobody had.
That being that nobody had a final say.
That's right.
Nobody you could go to was held accountable for it, except it could come back to you.
Everybody's responsible, nobody's accountable.
Right. Right. And the other thing is that you expected to rotate through a lot of jobs. 18 months to 24 months was the time that you kind of rotate, so you got all sorts of experience in different departments. So by the time that project started, you were out, or the leader was out. And that's how it happened. It was very interesting. So you had to be well liked, right? I mean, and figure out. And this was a real boomer thing, because I think it goes back to when I was growing up. Mom said, oh, go out and play. So it didn't matter who was out there, right? Boys, girls, younger, older, I had to go out and play. With my millennial children, I set up play dates. I said, I have to call up and set it up. So it's very, very different. And so you get this nice little play date. But when I went out, I mean, if I had to play with 6 boys, I had to do that. So the boomers were perfect for this because they knew how to do all that. They knew how to play with all these different people. I mean, that was one of the skills that you learned at an early age. Well, Gen X had a different experience. So they might be home alone in a latchkey kid situation. Mom might have worked by then. They might have been in childcare. And they even wanted to flatten the hierarchy even more because they were worried about their career. So they took charge of their career. The boomers kind of took charge in a company of their career, but Gen X took charge of their career. And that was a shock, that attitude to the boomers. They had never heard that you would not be loyal to the company. And traditionalists certainly hadn't heard that. But Gen X said, it's my career. I'm going to take charge of it. You want to reward me? Give me skills. Send me to training so my career moves ahead. And then the millennials came in, and they think they're very competent in the areas that they're doing that may be technology, new ideas, but this whole leadership style they're not sure about because it's just different than, because they're a team and a group, they don't see it so much as a leader. If you're good at something, then you become the leader. There's not a leader. So let's see how that continues to play out. So with technology, as I can attest, when my son started to work on my website, my hit rate went up from 15 people to what, like 50 in like overnight. So he had the technology thing down. Yeah, but that's true. Feedback. Okay. So here you are, you're a traditionalist in a hierarchical situation in a company. The boss has a big office in the corner and everybody else like that. If the boss didn't walk down the aisle where you were sitting, because no news is good news, right? You were doing okay. You were fine. As soon as they saw the boss walking down, everybody get all nervous. Who is he going to talk to? So no news was good news. You had your once-a-year performance review. They said you were doing a good job. You got the standard raise. And that's how it moved along. The boomers, okay, you can, the leader give me feedback, but it's got to be positive. Because I'm running around talking to everybody, and so you got to give me credit for doing that. And they wanted positive feedback. Gen X then changed it. Give me feedback anytime. I want to know, because I want to leave at 5, what you want from me, and I'll get it done. So give me feedback. That's what I want right now, right here. How did I do yesterday? Should I continue or not? So they changed the whole feedback. And the millennials need constant feedback. When they don't get feedback, they take your silence as disapproval. Very important to give feedback all the time. And for some boomers, that's really difficult. Well, you're doing a good job. We don't have to tell you. And I've heard that over and over again from leaders. Those 2 boomers will say, he wanted feedback. What do you mean? He's doing fine. And they can't understand why the constant feedback. But that's what they need. And part of it has to do with the structure. So
part of it has to do with the fact that millennials talk to each other all the time on the phone.
Right.
They can't just have friends. They have to be in contact.
Right, but they're getting feedback.
Yeah, exactly.
They're getting feedback from their friends. That's what they're doing. Instant feedback. That's what they're getting. And they're not sure what constructive feedback means. Because remember, anybody have millennial children? The first time you go to soccer, the first year, you find out that the losing team gets a trophy. And you go, what do you mean? And it's like your boomer mentality is coming out, and they go, well, everybody gets a trophy. I go, okay, is it the same size? Oh, yes, it's the same size.
We don't want to diminish our self-esteem.
What? That's right.
Because we don't want to diminish their self-esteem.
Exactly. In fact, Time magazine, and I have the article here, has an article about the millennials. So they might have called the boomers the me generation. They call the millennials me generation. And it has to do with the feedback. So it shows them taking pictures of themselves and getting feedback from their friends. And that's part of the feedback mechanism. And you're very right when you said about the whole thing about self-confidence. So in the 70s or 80s came out this new way of parenting that you had to develop self-confidence in your children. So everybody gets a trophy and everybody wins is part of that building self-confidence, except when you do that and it goes overboard, it becomes, he calls it narcissistic. So that's what he in fact, let me pull out this article because I'll pass it around. I couldn't believe it that it sort of summed it up. I knew someone would ask that, and I do have the article. So it's this current week's Time magazine, and there it is, right in the front. It shows a millennial looking at herself in her phone taking a picture. So you'll all like that. And it goes to a real detailed study about the self-confidence building and everything to do with the building self-confidence, but overboard became narcissistic. So I thought that was really interesting. Here's the recognition, and that goes starting with the millennials, so everybody wins. That's part of the mentality. When I played a team, the team lost, they lost, right? Only the winners got a trophy. But here, everyone gets one. Gen X, recognition anytime. And as I said, the boomers wanted it more formal, make it positive, and the traditionalists once a year. So let's talk about the communication pattern. So picture the millennials and the Gen X might be in childcare. And they might be in situations now where different communication, either by phone, is really what's expected. And the conversation might be on the phone. So the communication pattern is different. And the traditionalists, it was all this formal, written conversations, a lot of corporate speak. The boomers, it was in team meetings. Then Gen X came in and said, much more challenging. Tell me right away how I'm doing. I want instant feedback so I know whether to change my style or keep it that way. And the communication pattern changed, and with Gen X. And the millennials, because it's hard to get that constructive feedback, would then ask their friends, how am I doing? Or while they're giving a speech, let's say I had my phone here, I'd be getting feedback, doing a great job, you're great. So I would know to keep on going. So,
right there.
right, that's right. So that's the different communication. And I'm going to talk about this in a couple of minutes about the conversation with the leader. It's a conversation, it's not top down. So picture this. You're in a meeting with a traditionalist, a boomer, Gen X, and a millennial, and they want a conversation. The traditionalist says, well, just tell me and I'll do it. The boomer's saying, oh, well, we could matrix this and let's talk to everybody. Gen X is saying, no, tell me what I need to do. And the millennial says, oh, let me think about that, and they're giving you ideas. So this whole communication becomes totally different. A lot of conflict there, uncomfortableness, and besides, it's an in-person meeting, so the millennials are uncomfortable. So here's creating the tension and conflict and the values that are different. That alone, if you're a leader or in a team meeting or you have volunteers whatever the situation, it makes it really difficult because people are just have different expectations about how the message is going to come out. So people just get uncomfortable. So then they might pick on, well, the boomers, you'll work all night, or traditionalists. But it's more on the values and the communication. That's really what it is, and what the expectation is and how that's conveyed. Does that make sense? Yes?
What I always wonder about with all the technology and everything is how, so much of our language is body language.
Right.
Like right now,
Right.
speaking in a certain way.
Right.
I just don't understand where they get that from. Or they guess they just don't.
Okay,
Or
so.
are they doing that in a different way?
Okay, so let me give you a situation. All right, so let's say you're a traditionalist or a boomer, and one goes up to the other and says, did you hear what Bill got, the project he got? He got that project. And the other guy says, oh yeah. And boy, I'm glad I wasn't in that group. That's corporate language, right? So you knew right away by the tone, as a traditionalist and a boomer, and even some Gen X, what all that meant. It was a loaded statement, right? All this corporate linguistics, but it was the tone, and you could be standing there straight, and then, if someone walked by, you just didn't say anything. And so that conveyed a lot of messages. Well, if you're not that comfortable with these in-person meetings, so you're missing all this information. See, that was information transfer. Or, did you know Mary got that group? Oh yeah, I'm glad I'm over here, right? That conveyed lots of information. Now, if you're a millennial, not that comfortable, or you didn't go out to play with all these different people, or mommy set up the play date and it was very structured, just think of all that interaction and the dynamics that you may not be sure what's going on. So you quickly ask your friends what's going on because you don't intuitively get it as much as another generation. Does that make, because that's exactly how information was, you wouldn't write it, it would send it in an email, right?
Wouldn't you put it in a text or an email, put a smiley face or a frown face? That seems to be
Don't you think that it's true that the millennials aren't as intuitive?
Right, because a lot, don't you, there was always a bully on the block, right? And if your brother went out to play and the bully was there, your brother got beat up. I mean, it's all these things you learned how to, like all these, because you just were in these various situations that were uncomfortable when you were growing up. Or, that's, I had a ponytail at one point and the guy behind me pulled it that was just like, right? And, I turn around and, so that's how you kind of like figured out what was going on. I'm never sitting, in front of you again, right? So.
And the millennials were protected from a lot of that.
I think.
So they're not as intuitive.
Right, that, right. So here's it sort of sums it up. So the millennials and Gen X are not that comfortable with this person-to-person communication. They'd rather work from home. My daughter's boyfriend goes into the office once a week. I go, he's on the phone, he's emails. It's hard for them to actively listen, meaning getting the nuances of what's being communicated, and they miss these valuable information and guidance. So if you had one of those conversations where came up to you and said, well, Mary got that group, aren't you lucky you're in this group? You right away got all that information, you I'm never going over that way, I'll stay over here. You right away got all that information, but if you're not interested, if you're not intuitively attuned to that, you miss all that information. And they're just not sure of that corporate communication linguistics, what the tonalities meant. And, if you're in person, you see someone's body language. If people are talking really slow and they're sort of hunched over, and you get the feeling that it's a secret. When they're not, when they're more open, then it's not. So this is what that's how you picked up on what was going on. So that's a problem. And something, if you're dealing with millennials in the workplace, you need to understand that. So how do you shift the communicate? Yes.
I have a question, because I was just teaching my first semester, and all these things that you're talking about with millennials, I can relate to my class. Can you, I mean, one of the things that I started doing, because I don't listen in class, was try to put things in writing and put it out on e-learning for them. Do they, I mean, if you send emails and other forms of written communication, do they grasp that better?
That's how they communicate with each other.
Okay, so it's better.
But only if it's very short.
Yes.
6 words or less. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bullet.
Yes.
Don't make it long.
Not 6 words or less.
It's
So I think
bullet.
that's a problem.
It's not paragraph
Yeah.
reading, it's not in-depth
Yeah,
reading,
it's
it's
Twitter,
just,
it's Twitter.
Yeah, it's Twitter.
So,
Does anyone provide this kind of training for the millennials on how they can talk to boomers and traditionalists?
Yes.
I work for a corporation.
Yes.
I work for a corporation that provides
Yeah, really
lots
know
of
it.
training for the boomers and the Gen X.
That's right.
On how to work with Gen Y and millennials.
Right.
And my perspective was, I'll do that training. I will go and
Right.
participate. But I would like somebody to spend some time training the other half of the population.
Right.
So they know how to communicate with us.
Right.
And I don't know, I just feel like we're making all the concessions.
Right.
We're the adults, I guess. We have to
always
do
have
that.
made concessions for the millennials. Remember, they got trophies even if they were losers.
You know, I tell you, I proposed for several big corporations a way to do group training with millennials. It had to be group training. I wasn't going to do individual like coaching. Or had to be group training because they like groups. I said, why don't you set up just a millennial, you know, by level or however. And, you know, they said, oh, no, we're just going to do leadership training. But you're right. I agree with you, is what I'm saying. They really understand that you have to come and interact. And it was all sorts of, had all these sort of interaction exercises, nothing really on slides. And I said, we only do it for half a day, not a full day. They can't take a half. And I said, 2 hours is probably ideal. That's what no, really. And, you know, they said, well, you know, so they focused in on the leaders. You're absolutely right.
I'm tempted to schedule more meetings just to make sure the millennials come to work. It's kind of my takeaway.
Right. Right. Exactly. And so I said, the training won't be long. I said, I won't go over 2 hours because I'll lose them. And the person just kept looking at me sort of with this blank look, but we'll do the leaders. But I go, maybe they don't need the training. And so, yes, it didn't fly. I tried.
Thank you for trying.
Yeah, but they said, well, the leaders will change. And so this is geared to... So this...
It doesn't speak very well for the future of our country. If you have a bunch of millennials running this place when they can't focus.
They can't focus, except on themselves. Give them a trophy, they'll be happy.
You know, I've never really thought of all this different in generations until I hired this young lady that's 26, 27 years old, and she came to work for me, and she looked at this electric typewriter and she looked at me, she said, I've heard of them, but I've never seen one. And right then I thought, I've never really thought of that kind of thing. And then I had a little Chinese management trainee that came to me and she said, you're pretty good at computers for someone your age. I said, my age? And she said, yes, my mother is 45 and doesn't know anything. Aren't you the same age? I said, yes, I am. Yes. But, you know, you never really think about it until all of a sudden it was like...
Right.
It's even worse when your millennial son is on YouTube presenting a brand new phone at the big computer expo in Vegas. And he's explaining the new technology. He says it's so simple, even my mom can do it. He never thought I'd see it. Didn't think I was well versed enough to Google it.
Well, I have to tell you, there was Sheryl Sandberg did this YouTube where she said, don't leave before you leave. It was maybe 3 minutes where she's standing in front of this big meeting. And I use that in many of my women type of communication presentations. Now she's written this book. And I have to tell you, I'm looking at the book and I'm going, oh, I have to read this whole book. Where's the YouTube? That, you know, some of this starts to rub off on you. The speed of the YouTube, the message, the condensedness. It starts to make sense when you don't have a lot of time, that the conciseness of it and just the fact you can get it really quickly, that I'm starting to see, okay, there's something here. And maybe when I have more time or feel my schedule's like a person, you know, it takes over me, that maybe I'll have time to read the whole book. But yeah, I'd love a YouTube version. So, you know, some of that kind of wears off. You kind of like migrate slowly. But I don't think anything will replace this communication.
I think she had a TED Talk. Are you familiar with TED?
Yes, yes.
A TED Talk that was like a prelude to
right.
on Lean In. So
yeah.
looking for a shorter version.
Right, and TED Talks are what, 13 minutes, 14 minutes? Yeah. So it's very interesting how we tend to adapt and move a little bit forward on that. Yeah. So when it comes to information, then it's if we think of information as communication is the flow of information and information as communication, then we look at it differently than maybe we have. And if we look at it as transparent, not the way the boomer and the traditionalists would communicate with each other, but in a way that's concise now, so it's transparent. We take a more millennial view of it. And if it's more of a conversation than top down, maybe some ideas will come out of it. So I always go back to my son he sort of did something on my website. I wasn't sure what he did, but when it jumped from 10 to 50, I said, well, maybe he's doing something that's worthwhile. So he said, well, I'm going to change your front page. I said, go ahead. Really? Don't even ask me. Just go ahead. So sometimes we have to see what's good and creative coming out of a different perspective. And I agree with you. If we had mutual training where millennials were trained and the leaders and the boomers and they were trained, maybe we'd have better communication. It's not all one-sided, but we have to kind of be more flexible. And I think that's what's happened. It's been my way or the highway, and we need to be more top-down and top-bottom and have more of a conversation about whatever the information is. Because there are similarities between the generations. Everybody wants continued employment. They want to feel good. They want career opportunities. They want feedback. They want the leader to tell them how they're doing. They want to work for a company that's successful. And they want to belong. So these are universals that all generations feel. And for intergenerational success, you have to measure the performance, not the appearance. So my example in the beginning where the two boomers are talking, well, I thought she was texting, and sure enough, he gets back to his office, the whole meeting is summarized. Maybe it's the performance part, not the appearance, and providing some flexible solutions. And maybe it is more collaborative communication. Maybe we need to encourage millennials in a more structured way to find out a solution. And maybe because they do need structure, maybe you have to have 2 or 3 meetings. Maybe they're short, though. Maybe they're not longer meetings. So here's the strategic way to use the generation. So that's part of the form here. So if you have templates or you want to pass along institutional knowledge, it's your traditionalists. They're very good at mentoring. They're very loyal. They'll come in. They'll be happy to work because of the social interaction. And they're probably fun to be around. The boomers have all sorts of leadership information, what worked and what didn't work. And they can drive succession plans. and they should stay in the organization and help with that transition. The Gen X's are now moving into leadership. They need some help. They need some help in what's worked before and what hasn't worked. And they need some continuity. And they need training, because now they're in charge. And they've got to bridge the gap. As a smaller generation, less in numbers, more of them are going to move into leadership and bridge the gap, and it's global and it's instantaneous. So they have a hard job in front of them. And the millennials need structure, and they need goals, and they need that structured play date with feedback. That's exactly what they need. And they need to learn some people skills. And so I agree with you. They need training on that. What's going on in a conversation? Read the body language. Learn about the basic communications. So the generational workplace, best to create something that's based on people's strengths and make the organizational culture stronger, and invest in that human capital and the analytics, succession planning, and understand the role of technology and understand the impact of virtual teams. I wonder about that, what that means of virtual teams. When I was at EDS, I had people in Australia. So it was Saturday morning and it was Friday in the US. And I said, Saturday morning and you're up so early because you're calling me at 4 o'clock on Friday or 4 o'clock on Thursday. And they were like way ahead. And same with when England, you had to call by 2 o'clock, otherwise they weren't there. They went home. So what is that impact? Then we had a team in India. So while you were sleeping, they were working. And then the what is the impact of that? So I'm not sure we know that impact. So we need to continue to understand all that. And understand that the workplace now mimics the marketplace because it's global. Any questions?
Is there a quick fix for all of this?
No, but I think communicating, getting some of these ideas out in a more organized way will help. And not being afraid of this generational things you see happening or the disconnects. And saying, well, it's not just you or your company. And taking away as being personal but more objective in terms of the generations. That's really what the big takeaway is. It's not a personal thing, it might be a generational thing. I mean, you can overlay gender and where you grew up and also the education. I mean, you can overlay all sorts of things. But if you just look at it from a generational perspective, it's easier to solve the problem that way and not get personal about it. Any other?
Can you go through the sheet real quick?
Yeah, let's go through the sheet. Okay. Can I share your sheet? All right. Okay, so who's going to lead a discussion on the team's mission?
Baby boomer.
Yeah, the baby boomer or Gen X might help out. Who's going to define the communication process for the team?
Baby boomer.
Well, the millennials too, big on communication.
Oh, okay.
Remember, you're trying to use people's strengths. Who's going to set up the marketing plan? Gen X and the millennials, with help from the millennials. Who's going to provide definitions of the team member roles? Traditionalists, right. Define similar subgroup activities. The traditionalists. Because they're going to give you that process and the template. And they'll be so happy. Okay, ensure team members' unique skills are utilized. Gen X.
Gen X.
Yeah. Because this is my career, this is what I'm good at, remember? Get team members energized about the idea or a new product. Go team, it's your boomers, right?
Yeah, finally the boomer.
Do away with team job descriptions. Millennials and Gen X. Lead the overall meeting. Depends who's in, if you get a boomer or the Gen X, depending who's in charge.
The one before that, Valerie.
Focus on the team member strengths.
Gen X.
Gen X, yeah. Because again, it's my career, what I did well. And then obtain senior manager approval for the project. Boomer or Gen X, yes. That's Gen X, yeah. Organize the team and keep them on track for deadlines. You're traditionalists. Organize the team. Okay, that was the truth. Want to contribute to the company's success. Everyone. Everyone wants that. There's not one generation that doesn't want that.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not getting that.
No? So what
generation are you from? Well, the millennials, they don't really give a rip about the company. That's true. I don't think they do about
well,
they're all about me.
me. It's me, three me's.
Right, but I agree, because I think that they don't necessarily care about the company's success when they care about their own, and they'll move to the next job even if it's another company.
Right, but if you get them and engage them, they will care about the team. Yeah, you got to get them, if they're doing what they like to do, and that's what this exercise is, then you try to get them hooked in. But if you look at them objectively as a generation, yes, they may not be the team player.
Well, and show how they contribute, because we've got maybe 2, 3, 4 years out of college, and he moved over to my section, didn't want to come, keep wanting to go back over. Well, we've got him hooked in because he's really, I want him. He's a very, very bright young man. And he reads things very thoroughly, and he'll have questions that he'll find errors in something that the synopsis that our national office has put together, because he's out in the field doing the stuff. And so he'll do the question, we'll send it up, and it will create a new answer, a new product for the whole country. Well, then we kudos, yay, Brandon, we get it on the conference call. Brandon's totally hooked in. I mean, he's now, he's done this a couple times, and he's yay team, getting getting good feedback, and he's happy as he got the trophy. He got the trophy.
That's it. That's it. Here's the article from Time Magazine. So she's taking a picture, and he calls it the me generation. So I'll pass this around, take a quick look at it in the article, and get the date on the Time Magazine. Can deal with risk and make a good decision. So who's good at, what generation's good? Gen X, really good at that. Because, I'm taking care of my career, so, it's okay. I can make a decision. Motivate the team to succeed. That's your boomers. Boomers really like that. Really like the team. Keep a team consistent with previous processes. That'd be your traditionalists. Define flexible communication methods, person, email, that's going to be your millennials. Oh, we can text, And then define the team attitude toward work hours. Your Gen X and millennials do not like to work late. And traditionalists and boomers, really anything to get it done. That is really, and I've been in meetings where I've given a speech, and the millennials will say, well, because I'm single and I don't have to go home, they expect me to work late. Well, I have things I have to do. And the boomers will sit there, and the traditionals go, the job has to get done. What do you mean? So that value is really difficult.
And the boomers have not only done it, but when someone says, I'm single and they expect me to work, and the boomers are thinking, I was arranging after-hours daycare and all that other stuff to make sure that I was here for that.
Right.
That's the conflict.
Or got up at 6 o'clock in the morning, got it done, or whatever I had to do. So yeah, that's if you engage them though, then you have less of a problem on that. That's a generational thing about and Gen X too. Kind of now that they're leaders, that might be a shift there. So engaging employees is really key. Getting them into the team And then the last one, define a related dress code for team meetings. That's the millennials or Gen X. There's no dress code, right?
I'm just happy to see you.
Right, you're happy they come dressed. No wrinkles. I remember when they changed the dress code at EDS, everybody walked in with wrinkles, and someone said, this looks like wrinkles now. So then they upped it afterwards. Well, I'm here if you have any questions, you have information about me, and I appreciate that.